Imagine you just graduated from high school. You meet your soulmate at a very unlikely place, cosmetology school. After a whirlwind relationship, the two of you get married and you're enjoying your romantic honeymoon. When out of nowhere, paradise becomes your final resting place. Deadly Deep Dives. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kimbyrleigha, and if you've never been here before, nice to finally meet you. This case is a little different than the other ones I've done. There's definitely a disturbing aspect to it, as well as a very unusual court proceeding. That's one of the craziest parts. And I always hope you stay till the end, but I really hope that you stay till the end for this one. I know that sometimes we're content knowing who did it, but in this case, there's more to learn. It's just way more unbelievable, and I'm going to tell you, just wait. And speaking of waiting, before we get into this video, I just want to thank our sponsor for today, and that is Scentbird. As you can see, I am not in my regular set. I'm actually on vacation in Mexico, and one thing I really like about Scentbird is they're really portable, and so you can bring them everywhere, so I was able to bring all of them on my trip. The perfume vials come in this cute little black bag. Inside, you'll find the perfume dispenser case, and all you do is turn the bottom, and you can see the silver part pop up. That's where the perfume comes out for you to spray it. Then, when you're done, all you do is turn the bottom again, and it's nice and secure in its case, so it won't leak or accidentally spray. Scentbird provides a monthly supply of your choice of perfume and a generous amount. Look how much you get in this vial compared to those tiny samples we're used to. I love how you can discover a new scent that you've never tried before, like this one I chose, called Story Venetian by Valmont in Just Bloom. It has gardenia, lily of the valley, and it's so light and feminine. With Scentbird, you get to choose a new designer fragrance every month for only $17. This way, I can try a fragrance before I buy a full bottle, and I'm sure you know how expensive full bottles can be, anywhere from $150 to sometimes over $300. And they have a lot of unisex fragrances to choose from. It's a completely different way to experience shopping for a new perfume. They even have a quiz you can take based upon other fragrances you like and scents that you've purchased in the past. That way you'll find something you love. This one was my absolute favorite. It's Pink Sugar Red Velvet. I've actually been wearing the original Pink Sugar for years, but this one is even better. It smells so sweet. It has strawberry, red fruits, Gormano Accord, caramel, and vanilla. And I get so many compliments on this wherever I go. Scentbird carries Prada, Gucci, Versace, and even niche brands like Skylar. I'm leaving all 3 fragrances below with the links to each one, so don't forget to look in the description box. Heretic and Confessions of a Rebel. I love how you get these little cards, and they tell you which fragrance you received and what undertones they have in them. The third one I chose was Narcisco Rodriguez for Her in Floor Musk. For me personally, fragrances always bring back memories, and that's why I keep buying the same ones over and over again, and making new memories every month by discovering new scents with Scentbird. I personally picked these scents because I was going on my very first vacation to Mexico, and I really wanted to remember all of the fun moments I experienced while I was here. Make sure to use my coupon code TRUECRIME for 55% off at Scentbird. It's just a little over $7 for your first month, and it's available in the USA and Canada. A big thank you once again to Scentbird for partnering with me on this video and supporting my channel. Now let's get into this case for today. As usual, there are several people that I want to introduce you to. Maybe more people in this case than many others, but I want to start with Yolanda Sorillo. In 2002, she was 28 years old, and she was a single mom living in Miami, Florida. And yes, this is another Florida case, and again, I promise this was not on purpose. I feel like at this point, I'm gonna have to do an entire series on Florida cases. I'll think about it, but yes, once again, I am taking you to Florida. Miami, Florida, to be exact. I am sure most of you have heard of Miami, but I still want to paint a picture of where these events took place. But as you just heard, I was just in Mexico, and one of you lovely subscribers of mine actually recognized me there at the resort I was staying at, and I just want you to know, if you ever see me, please come say hi. I'm just a normal person, and I feel like we're all friends. But people watch me from all over, and I sometimes don't realize it. So not everyone is familiar with places in the United States like Miami, Florida. And Miami is the party capital of South Florida. There's great weather year round. It's perfect for spending time at the beach. It's full of beautiful people with, hot bodies, pool parties. It's an exciting place and it has a great nightlife. There's a part of Miami called South Beach, and it's full of hotels and bars that line the beach. There's really no end to the fun, and it's all about being gorgeous and having the time of your life, hooking up, hanging out, and leaving your worries behind you. You'll see people in designer outfits, foreign cars, perfect bodies, whether they're surgically enhanced or do 2 hours in the gym. It is heaven for single people, vacationers, and anyone that just enjoys the fast-paced lifestyle. As a matter of fact, some of the bars don't even close until the sun goes up, so you will be leaving the club and driving past or walking past people on their way to work. So there's the picture of that. Yolanda wasn't living in the heart of Miami Beach. She lived more of a laid-back lifestyle. She was more on the quiet side. She was pretty. She had big brown eyes, dark hair. She was shy, down to earth, and she was doing her best to be a good mom to her little girl. She was already over the party life. She was conservative and ready to find a husband to settle down with. And she finally found the one, her boyfriend, Michel Escoto. It was cool because they were friends first and they got along really well. And then eventually things just naturally progressed into a romantic relationship. They met because they were both going to school for computer technology. Michel had plans to start a very lucrative career in tech. He's everything Yolanda has always wanted, and he's what a lot of women have always wanted. He's quite a looker. He's 6 feet tall. He's handsome. He takes care of himself. He's charming. He's smart, ambitious. He's a catch, and Yolanda caught him. They do also say opposites attract, and they were definitely opposites. Michel is outgoing. He likes to drink. He likes to be the life of the party. He's adventurous, romantic, fast-paced, and he's an excitement seeker. Maybe people with his personality type find comfort and stability with someone like Yolanda. He doesn't have to worry about her doing anything devious, but that's kind of his nature. However, at this point in his life, he's kind of tamed that beast. He's 30 years old, and he has shown Yolanda that he's serious about settling down. The couple had been living together for about over a year, sharing each other's lives, and he's even somewhat of a stand-in father figure to her child, a family man that dotes on Yolanda and is committed to the relationship, and things are going really well. There's just one thing that Michel isn't quite content with. He wants to do more in his life. He wants a better career, and one day he dreams of opening his own business. He frequently shares these goals with Yolanda, and she fully supports him. She wants him to be happy and thrive, especially because it means that they will thrive. And that's important to Yolanda because she wants to marry Michel. She's got her eyes set on her fairy tale, with Michel being the knight in shining armor that's there to save her because he has done more for her than any man in her past. They discussed their future, and Michel had promised that once he's making the big bucks, they'd have the life that they both dreamed of. So Michel starts to brainstorm different industries that he could work in. And with all of the beautiful people in Miami, there was no lack of beauty salons, aesthetic med spas, surgery centers, and after thinking about it and the talents that he already had, he decided to look into cosmetology. He was already good at cutting hair, and he was confident that he could learn more of the business aspect and then open his own salon. And it would be great if just anyone could go right into styling, but Florida has strict rules when it comes to anything that's dealing with people services. There's actually a Florida Cosmetology Act. You need a license to work in the beauty industry in Florida. So Michel finds a school nearby called LaBelle Beauty Academy, and he decides to enroll. It still exists today, and it's in the 8th Street Shopping Center right here. I'm going to show you a picture on Google Maps. On the website, it says created to create. They have flexible schedules, affordable payment plans, financial aid for the people that qualify, and endless opportunities. So this sounded perfect to Michel. And the schedules are anywhere from Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's like a full-time job. Or going into the evening from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. So Yolanda is expecting that Michel would be gone a lot. And she was okay with that because it was important for him to reach his goals. Sometimes you do have to make compromises and sacrifices in relationships for the good of the whole relationship and for one another. So Michel starts classes in February of 2002, and he's a big fish in a small pond because he's one of the very few men, straight men at that were attending the beauty school. And of course, beauty school tends to attract beautiful people or people who want to look their best. So he is surrounded by beautiful women, and not just that, young, beautiful women. So he is in his element, to say the very least. And if you know anything about cosmetology school, you are there to practice your craft on fellow students. And that means hands-on experience. Michel was really enjoying beauty school. And maybe it was because of what he was learning, or maybe it was because of all the attention he was getting from a number of women he was surrounded by. He was charming. He was definitely the type of guy who wasn't shy about holding back and complimenting women. He's a ladies' man. He compliments them from their head to their toes. Oh, your hair looks great. I love your style. What a beautiful dress. Gorgeous eyes. And the list goes on. There's another thing that I want to mention about going back to school in your 30s as opposed to starting school in, let's say, your 20s. It's like you have this new lease on life. Everything's exciting again. It's reminiscent of your younger days. A lot of people get really into this new life that they start to experience, especially if they're getting attention from people who are younger than them. You kind of fall back into your old ways. And there was just a lot of temptation around Michel. As much as he was committed to Yolanda, he started to be very tempted, especially when he met a beautiful 21-year-old young woman named Wendy Trapaga. I'm going to introduce you to her in just a moment, but as Michel was focusing on school, I'm doing air quotes there, Yolanda had no idea that he was flirting and being inappropriate in a lot of ways, doing things that she wouldn't exactly approve of while he was away from home. The fact is, he would come home every night to her and have their normal family life together. And I think a lot of people like the aspect of living this double life. Having the stability and security to go home with someone that you know will always be there to cook for you, have sex whenever you want, and to support you. Meanwhile, you can have these exciting encounters, even if they're not sexual, if they're emotional cheating, or just getting close to people in a way that your partner wouldn't exactly approve of. The more time Michel spent around his temptation, the more he started to let his guard down. But there's something you have to know about him to understand everything that happens going forward. He has never been faithful to any woman that he's ever dated. And this is according to a friend that knows him very well. As a matter of fact, Michel would brag about the fact that he slept with over 300 women. Yeah, I don't know if this is true, but a person who brags or uses that as a bragging point, I don't know. To me, it's a little sleazy, maybe not. I mean, I am judging him here, yes. It's just the fact that he would use that as a way to brag that makes me feel gross. Like I can imagine what kind of guy he is. He also drove a red Ducati motorcycle, and he would drive it up to the beauty school and park outside, take off his helmet. And for some reason, it reminds me of a guy who would like shake his hair, you know, when he gets off his motorcycle. I don't know. He had short hair, so I'm not sure that was him, but I'm just trying to imagine the type of guy. It's almost like my douchebag alarm starts going off in my head. But let's proceed. I'll explain more about why I feel that way, and I think you might agree with me hearing what happens next. But you know what? Let me back up and just say this. Maybe he hadn't found the one yet, and I'm being serious. I think that all of us can say that we've maybe done things that people wouldn't approve of when it comes to romantic relationships. I've broken up with people and dated other people when I realized, you know what? I'm not in love with them, or I'm seeking something else. And maybe the truth was he just hadn't found Mrs. Right. And as you get older, there's also a sense that you don't have a lot of time to find someone that you're actually extremely, genuinely happy with, like that perfect person for you. And in that case, you are more likely to end a relationship because of the prospect of having a happier life for the rest of your life. That could have been what Michel was facing at this moment because he's starting to develop an attraction to Wendy. And I want to tell you all about Wendy now because she wasn't hard to love. She was very lovable, very charismatic, and beautiful. Probably one of the most beautiful women that Michelle had ever laid eyes on. Honestly, I'm not just saying that. I've been putting pictures of her on the screen, and here are more. I'm going to do it throughout this video, as many as I can find. She's absolutely gorgeous, and she had a personality to match. She was model beautiful, but she didn't have a pretentious attitude. She was humble, and I think it was because of her upbringing and her childhood. So I want to go back to April 29th, 1981. Wendy Marie Trapaga was born to her mother Miriam and her father Ernesto. Her mom was from Colombia, and she moved to the United States in 1979. She started living in Miami, and that's where she met Ernesto, who was a pilot. Miriam was 21 years younger than Ernesto, but they ended up falling in love and settling down in Miami. They get married, and just a couple years later, Wendy comes into this world. Oh, and she was a daddy's girl. She was a sweetie pie, a little angel, and she grew up in a very loving household. Both her mom and her dad doted on her. She was the love of their lives. Ernesto spent a lot of time traveling since he was a pilot, but he was a cargo pilot. So his job wasn't about transporting people, it was about transporting things. And in 1988, Ernesto was working for a company called Egyptian Air Transport. He would fly all around the world, and this time he was in Nigeria. He was transporting a plane full of cows, Mercedes limousines, and a bunch of other stuff. And the type of plane he flew was called a DC-8 cargo plane. He was actually a former Panama senior captain, and he was a great pilot. He also had a really fun personality. Someone he worked with said that one time he came to the airport riding his bicycle, and he was in full-on uniform. His luggage was strapped to his handlebars, and he had this funny, quirky personality. It was March 31st, 1988. Wendy was 6 years old, and she was waiting for her dad to come home from his trip from Egypt. However, this was the day that changed this family forever. Because upon takeoff, Ernie tried to get the plane into the air as usual. As he sped down the runway, the plane would not become airborne, so he went back around and he tried a second time. And devastatingly, the plane caught fire, and it was 50 yards from the ground, and it crashed into the desert area around the airport. What was interesting is that this plane was a replacement for another DC-8 that had slid off of a runway just a few days earlier in Denmark. And that plane was on its route to Egypt to pick up the same cargo. That plane was completely damaged, and so this plane was dispatched with a new crew, and it was involved in a fatal crash and destroyed. Even the cows were killed. It was completely heartbreaking, especially for a little 6-year-old girl. And this was Wendy's childhood. This is what she experienced. And you take that with you throughout your life. Of course, you hear of people's parents dying, of heart attacks, even cancer, but a plane crash is something else. It's unrelatable in so many ways, and having to live that fact and retell that story to those you meet and get close to, the loss may be able to be understood, but the circumstances would probably be a little harder. This was the first tragedy for this family, and there will be another, unfortunately. So Ernesto was 61 years old when he died, and it was devastating for Miriam. After Ernesto passed, she was a single mom, and she wanted to provide what she could for her children, so she took a job working at a school as a secretary. And she worked so hard. She was able to rise up the ranks and became a supervisor of after-school programs in a Miami-Dade County elementary school. She ends up falling in love again and marrying Juan Benitez. I wasn't sure if her children came from her previous marriage to Ernesto or whether they were coming from Juan Benitez. However, they were a lot older than Wendy, and they did call Wendy their step-sibling. I'm assuming that those children are from her new marriage. It doesn't matter because Wendy wasn't seen as a stepchild, maybe by definition, but they treated her like a blood or biological relative. They were there to step in and raise Wendy, especially her sister Rita. Rita was like a second mother. She was there to teach Wendy everything, and her siblings absolutely adored her. Because like I said, she was easy to love. Another thing is, they doted on her a lot. It's kind of like she got some extra love because what happened to her father, and that's okay. Sometimes people need extra love. They're more sensitive. Their emotions are hard for them to deal with, and they harbor that fear of loss. Wendy grew up not only loving her family, but she adored animals. It didn't matter what kind of animal. It could be a bunny, a puppy, kittens, you name it. She loved rescuing animals that were hurt and nursing them back to health. And as a matter of fact, she dreamed of becoming a vet. Unfortunately, she had very bad allergies, and it made it really hard for her to be around animals. Her sisters still tried to encourage her to keep going, especially throughout her teens and her high school years. But because of who she was and how pretty she was, she gravitated towards another passion that she had, and that was fashion and beauty. She was the epitome of beauty, with these dark brown eyes and this long, beautiful hair and a smile that just radiated. There was no denying that when she walked into a room, the eyes were on her. The thing about Wendy is that she wasn't full of herself. She wasn't up on some high horse. She was humble, and she cared about others. And as a matter of fact, something that she did stood out to me. She was a senior in high school at the time, and she was saving up money because she wanted to take those gorgeous senior photos. She just wanted them to be perfect. But there was something happening before those pictures, and that was prom. And that could be an even more exciting time in your senior year. And there was a girl at her school that she was close to that couldn't afford a dress to go to prom. So what did Wendy do? She took all that money that she saved and she went out and bought satin to make a dress for this young girl. And that is just unbelievable. That is the kind of person that she was. She was there to help others and to make them feel important. Not only that, she did her hair and her makeup. And that was part of her passion. She wanted to make people look beautiful. And finally, her sister says, you know what? You should follow that dream. She decided that right after she graduated from high school, she was going to follow in the footsteps of two of her cousins. Both of them owned beauty salons. Now, I will say this. I'm not going to go into detail about this, but Wendy was married for a very short time after she graduated from high school, but she ended up getting a divorce. So by 21 years old, she is ready to focus on herself. And that's why she enrolled at La Belle Beauty Academy in Miami alongside Mr. Michel Escoto. Now you have to understand that from a 21-year-old's viewpoint, someone like Michel is pretty fascinating. He carries himself well. He's very charming. He's complimenting her, doting on her. But not only that, he talks about how he's a web designer. He's got a degree in technology. And you don't really think that you're going to meet your dream guy at beauty school. It seems like an unlikely place for Wendy to meet Mr. Right. Or was he Mr. Right now? A young girl can look up to someone that's 10 years older than her. And because she lost her father, I'm not saying this is a 100% fact, but she could look toward older men as safety. Not exactly to replace her father, of course not. But there is something to say about that. And remember, her mother married someone 20 years older than her. So it wasn't really out of the ordinary to consider being with an older man. And she was very attracted to Michel. He didn't exactly act like he was very forthcoming about the fact he already had a girlfriend that he was living with that had a child that was relying on him to better himself for their future. Instead, he was spending a lot of time with Wendy in class. And he would act different depending on how different women were. For example, with Wendy, he was sensitive, soft-spoken, but there was also this bad boy style about him. He would roll up on his motorcycle. He had this exciting personality, and since Wendy was younger, she sort of matched that vibe. She was out there looking to have a good time, and they just clicked together. He was spending more and more time at school, and Yolanda thought he was working really hard, but instead, he's carrying on, at first, an emotional affair, and then a physical affair with Wendy, and it was steaming hot. They had sexual chemistry. They couldn't keep their hands off of each other. They were hooking up at the school. They were going places to hook up together. All the while, Yolanda is sitting at home wondering where Michel was, because it started to become a very regular thing that he wasn't coming home even after the time that the classes got out. So she starts wondering what is going on. He had been dating Yolanda for over 2 years. The thing that she didn't know was that this wasn't the first time Michel had done this. He had always had women on the side, this whole time. I don't know how he kept these secrets, but one of these women that he was seeing was even paying for the classes he was taking at beauty school. And it really does bother me because he started to get to the point where he couldn't wait to leave. He couldn't wait to leave in the mornings to run away from Yolanda and into Wendy's arms. It was almost as if he found a younger version of Yolanda. But there was something else. Something that was different about Wendy. Something that he could confide in her about. Something she didn't judge. It was almost as though he was allowed to be himself. And this was all revolving around something he enjoyed sexually. Not only did he have a huge sexual appetite that seemed like it could never be satisfied, and Wendy seemed to match that, which is why they had such a magnetic relationship, that they just fit together with their sexual desires and their frequency and the intensity. But it went one step further. They were allowed to see other people. They were swingers. I don't know the story. I don't know if Michel introduced Wendy to this lifestyle or whether she had always been curious about it, but they discussed it and they decided they wanted to do it. Him and Wendy, they're getting out of class and they're heading to a private swingers club called Miami Velvet. They cater to swingers being safe in an exclusive environment where you had to be a member to attend these events. This place still exists. I went to the website and there's a member area. And it says, welcome to Miami Velvet member site. Once you create a profile and you pay, you get access. And then you can see who's coming, what the upcoming events are. So just look right here. These are some of the events. And as you can see, there's a few different ones. There's Assume the Position, Newbie Night, and so on and so forth. It's also sort of a dating site in a way because you can view people's profiles, then you can meet them online, and then in person. Another interesting part of the website, it says that they love tourists. And they say that couples memberships fees will be waived for all first-time tourists that come through. This is Miami, Florida's largest premier swingers club. And people from all over the world actually come to experience this. So you have to imagine Wendy and Michel are meeting a lot of strangers, a lot of new people all the time. And I guess that could be pretty exciting. Just a revolving door of opportunities. It's a 20,000 square foot club that looks just like a swanky nightclub. They even have a cruise party where you can go on a mini vacation and hook up with other couples. You're going there expecting to hook up. Here's the main lobby. There are private rooms and open rooms. You can have sex on the couches in front of people or on little beds. You can do whatever you want in an environment where people are sort of, I don't want to say vetted, but it's different than just meeting someone randomly at a club and trying to hook up with them. And you're open to different people and they're open to you. Something I did learn about this lifestyle is that they said that the divorce rate is over 50% and there's a lot of affairs. So some people involved in the swinging lifestyle believe that having more of an open and honest relationship where they can swap partners helps their relationship in many ways. It's up to the person or the couple. If they're consensual about it and that's what they want to do, they're consenting adults and to each their own. But this is not something that someone like Yolanda would be partaking in. And Wendy, either to please Michel because she liked him so much or because she was genuinely interested in it, went along with this lifestyle. All the while, Wendy doesn't know about Yolanda either. So she thinks she's met this really fun guy, showing her the time of her life, maybe opening her eyes to new things sexually. And somehow he's living this double, maybe triple or quadruple life because he's also got other women on the side. It's just a lot for me to take in because somehow he's able to juggle all of this plus school. He has a friend he confides in, Ramon, and he talked about how Michel considered women as sexual conquests. And in the beginning, that's all Wendy was. She was just a young girl that he was flirting with and wanted to have sex with, and that was that. But as time went on, Ramon said that they were like high school sweethearts. It was like they were inseparable. There was this chemistry that you could just feel. And Michelle was falling in love. The thing that he really liked about Wendy, according to Ramon, was that she wasn't pressuring him. She wasn't asking him to marry her or put pressure on him that he had to do things a certain way. That might have been because she was young, or maybe because she had already been in a marriage and she just wasn't looking for that at the time. But Yolanda starts to get the sense that something isn't right. You can feel when your partner is pulling away. They become distant. They're not doting on you as much. They're not talking to you about their day. They're not even talking about their problems, their wins, their losses, or just their feelings. They sort of become more withdrawn. Sometimes they're irritable with you. And Yolanda was feeling pretty sad about the whole thing. She assumed this was a time for them to be happy as a couple and move forward. But now it just seemed like they were moving backwards in their relationship. She starts to become a little more determined to find out exactly what's going on. Even though Wendy's not putting much pressure on Michelle, a couple months went by and she did kind of want to know where the relationship was going. They're not showing people at beauty school that they're together. He's not taking her out on dates during the daytime. She's probably feeling like just to hook up. And that can make you think, what's going on here? Is he going to commit, or are we just going to be hooking up for the rest of this relationship? They're in school together. They have to see each other every day, and that can put you in an awkward position. So I understand why Wendy may have wanted an answer, and this could apply to anyone, but there's something about possessing the man you're with, to be able to say, he's mine. And so the girls at beauty school would stop flirting. And I understand that feeling. You want to claim what's yours. You want to flaunt it around and be proud of it. On the other hand, at home, Yolanda is becoming more like a roommate. They're like two ships passing in the night. They're not passionate. They're not romantic. And it has just totally fizzled out. But Yolanda is holding on as much as she can. She's putting even more pressure on Michelle to kind of fess up to what's going on, because she has a sneaking suspicion, and she's right, that he's cheating. She wants to know where he's going, so she starts asking him every time, why aren't you coming home? Where are you? She's calling him. He's not answering, and it's too much for him to handle. He begins to break. He doesn't want this relationship anymore. He's determined to break up with Yolanda. He's in love with Wendy, and he wants to be with her. So in August of 2002, Michelle decides to break up with Yolanda. But of course he doesn't say why. When you're in that position, it's hard, it's awkward. Even if you are the type of guy that's cheating and sneaking around and lying, you want to let the person down easily. So he doesn't give her an answer. He pretty much just gets in an argument, takes all of his stuff and leaves and never comes back. And Yolanda is stunned. This is the man she thought she was going to marry, and he can just up and leave that easily in the blink of an eye. They were supposed to be building something together. It was just so sudden, he was gone. So she wants closure. She wants to understand, what did I do wrong? Are you leaving me for someone else? He just denies, and stops talking to her. She's heartbroken. She's calling him nonstop for weeks, and he never returns her calls. She becomes desperate to understand, and without getting those answers straight from him, she takes matters into her own hands. And she's trying to guess the password to his voicemail, and she finally gets in, and she's playing all of his messages. And that's when she heard a woman's voice. That woman was Wendy. Not only was Wendy leaving a message, but what made Yolanda unable to believe or comprehend or fathom what she was hearing is when she heard Wendy say, "Hurry home. Hurry home." Yolanda could not believe this. He was living with another girl already. He left her and he's living with another girl in just a few weeks after their breakup. Yes, it's true. They moved in together. And you might be asking yourself, here are two beauty school students. Are they really able to afford a place in Miami Beach? Because you know school is like a full-time job. Well, no. They're not even able to afford an efficiency apartment. If you don't know what that is, it's like a bachelor. There's maybe like a sink, a toilet, one big living space, nothing fancy. It's definitely not living in the lap of luxury. This wasn't South Beach. This was a different part of Miami where you see a little bit more poverty. And sure, they're building their dreams. They're building up their careers. But this worried Wendy's mom. She might be able to understand that Wendy wanted to date this older man. Okay, she did the same thing. But she didn't think that he was good enough for Wendy. She didn't believe they made a good match. But the thing that worried her the most at the time was she found out that Michelle didn't have a job. She didn't know how they were going to even afford the small apartment they were in. All he was doing was attending beauty school. He would talk the talk, but he wouldn't really walk the walk, and it could take 2 years or 3 years until he graduated. So Miriam just thought this was too fast for them, and they needed to slow down. There was no rush. Why did they have to move in together, especially right away? Because Wendy had been living with her mom and stepdad. She was in a secure and safe environment. She didn't have to pay rent. She could come and go as she pleased. So why? Then there was something even more worrisome. She found out they didn't even have furniture. And there's nothing lavish or luxurious about sleeping on the cold floor of your apartment. Wendy's family couldn't see the appeal, but they realized that she had a helpful heart. She had been like that since a very young age, and it wasn't like she thought that Michelle was a project boyfriend, but it was as though she wanted to be part of his dreams, to feel that she was building something with him. So Miriam really didn't want to judge her too harshly, and her daughter was an adult, so she could do whatever she wanted. But she cared about Wendy, and she wanted the best for her. But it seemed like they were passionate about the same things, and she could envision that her daughter thought that they were going to open this business together. They'd be working side by side. They're going to grow as a couple and all the other things you think about as a young girl. They're going to get married, have babies together, live happily ever after. But something that Wendy and her family and other people started to notice was that Wendy was frugal. She saved her money. She knew how to make her own clothing. She would wear secondhand items. But her boyfriend, Michelle, he was always spending money. And where was he getting it from? Well, you know that he's seeing other women. One of those women is paying for his lifestyle. And they're probably paying for his rent. All the while, Wendy has no idea where the money is coming from. She probably thinks maybe he has a side job doing things on the computer for technology. Or maybe he has a savings because he's a 30-year-old man. But Wendy was naive. Wendy is even practicing her hair coloring skills on Michelle. Here's a picture. She bleached his dark hair blonde for the summer, and I'm not sure about this look for him, but great job. So you may or may not believe this, but just 3 months after they had been living together, they decide that they're going to get married. Yeah. And Wendy's mom, she wasn't going to hold back this time. She couldn't believe it. Wendy had already done this before, and she had been divorced. She rushed into things, and now she's doing it again. But being the type of woman Miriam was, as much as she wished that Wendy had fallen in love with someone else, she loved her daughter. She wanted to support her, so she didn't say anything. She couldn't say anything, but it was obvious that she was not happy. She did not approve of Michelle. And while I was researching this, I was under the impression, just like Wendy's family, that there was going to be this engagement period where they spend time planning their wedding, because her first wedding, it was beautiful. It was at a church. She had the beautiful white dress. Everything was like a fairy tale. But that's not exactly what Wendy and Michelle planned. Remember, they don't even have enough money to buy furniture. So how in the world are they going to afford a wedding? Well, they're not. They decide that in October of 2002, they're going to go down to City Hall and get married. That's it. No beautiful ceremony, nothing like that. And Miriam is now pressing Wendy about why she needs to rush into this. And that's when Wendy drops a bombshell on her mom. She tells her that she's pregnant. Now, let me just say, there's mixed emotions in this moment, because on one hand, you want so much to go right for your daughter. You want the best life possible for her. On the other hand, you're going to be a grandma. You know you're going to love that child no matter what, because you love your own daughter. And you don't want to be disappointed. This isn't the moment for that, because it makes it seem like it's negative. They were also a church-going family, so Wendy believed in getting married. She wanted to have a family. And Miriam finds this out just a few days before the marriage. And Miriam kind of thought, you know what? She never experienced that mother-father relationship family life. So maybe that's what she wanted. She was chasing her own little dream life. that she never got to have. So on Thursday, October 10th, 2002, Michelle and Wendy were married at the Miami Beach City Hall. Even though they didn't have a lavish wedding, they look beautiful. Here's a photo. They wanted to have a beautiful honeymoon. They didn't want to go far, probably because they couldn't afford it, but they wanted to feel like they were in a place that was exotic. So they went to one of my favorite places of all time, Key West, Florida, the southernmost point, the home of my favorite dessert, key lime pie. It's an island off of South Florida. It's about 90 miles from Cuba, and it's known for their cute little pastel-colored conch-style homes, scuba diving, which I used to do with my father all the time, snorkeling, and then the 7-mile bridge across the water. It's a great vacation destination. It's also very romantic. It's the perfect place for a honeymoon. It's around a 3 or 4 hour drive, so they set out on Friday, October 11th, just a day after their marriage. They plan to be gone the entire weekend and come back to Miami by Sunday evening. Wendy saw her mom before the trip. She gives her a hug goodbye, and her mom says, "Be safe," and Wendy says she'll be back by Sunday. The couple spent the first 2 days enjoying their time together as husband and wife. They stayed in a nice hotel, probably watched the sunset, had a few drinks, romantic dinners. By Sunday, October 13th, as planned, they were headed back to Miami, but they weren't ready to let the fun end. They still wanted to celebrate. So Michelle decides to get a fancy hotel suite at the Miami Executive Hotel that night. This hotel is known for romantic themed rooms called fantasy suites. Of course I'm going to show you. So let's look. There's one here with a red heart-shaped jacuzzi and other romantic amenities. This is their style though. There's also rooms like the jungle room, the cave with its own pool. You get the idea. Quite a nice little surprise for Wendy. She's excited. She calls her mom and she lets her know that they're going to be back in Miami, but they're extending their honeymoon one extra night and would be coming home the next day. She explained that they had plans to go to dinner, then see a movie, maybe go out dancing at a Miami nightclub. Miriam was kind of worried because Wendy was pregnant. So this time she did pipe up and tell her not to drink alcohol. From what we can understand at this point, Wendy loves to be spontaneous. She likes to party. She enjoys spicing things up romantically, and Michelle encourages it. So they go out to dinner, they go to a movie, then they check into their hotel at around midnight. They spend the next few hours enjoying one another in their hotel suite. Seems like a night like the one they planned is exactly what they would want to do to end their little honeymoon vacation, except they're not in the comfort and safe zone of their swingers club. They're on the town surrounded by strangers, consuming alcohol, getting a bit wild, and maybe this was a big mistake. Maybe they should have just gone home, because this would be Wendy's last night on earth. She just didn't know that yet. It's around 5:30 a.m. on Monday morning. Miriam is woken up by the sound of her phone ringing. It startled her, and when she looked at the clock and realized how early it was in the morning, her heart sank. She had a really bad feeling right away. In that split second before she picked up the receiver, many thoughts flew through her mind, and most of them were about Wendy. She didn't know what to expect when she picked up the phone. She said hello, and she heard a voice she recognized on the other end, but it's not her daughter's voice. It was the voice of her daughter's new husband, Michelle. He asked her if Wendy was there with her, and she's confused. Why would Wendy be with her? She was supposed to be with him on their honeymoon. What's going on? Miriam tells him that she hadn't spoken to Wendy since the day before when they were on their way back to Miami. Miriam wants to know what happened last night. Where was Wendy last, and when did Michelle see her? He explains they were out drinking, and Wendy wanted to continue, but he was worried about her drinking while pregnant. They get into a back and forth about it, and there was a lot of tension between them. It was their first official disagreement. They were arguing in the car. When they parked at their apartment, he decided to go inside to cool off. They both needed a breather. When he came out 5 to 10 minutes later, she was not there. He didn't know where she went. He called and called, but got no answer. That's why he called Miriam, thinking if anyone would know where she was, it would be her mother. Miriam's worried. Her daughter is pregnant and alone somewhere, missing, not answering calls. This was not right. So they wait to see if she ends up reaching out to them. Maybe she was upset, she needed a break, and she was with friends. They didn't want to immediately jump to conclusions, but it was hard not to because this was out of character for her. A couple hours later, Michelle still hadn't heard from Wendy, so he drove over to the school that Miriam works at, and he's waiting outside for her to meet him. He's a complete mess. He's distraught, he's worried, he's scared, and he wants to know, what are they going to do next? They decide once again to wait. It wasn't long before they would know exactly where Wendy was, and they probably wished that they would never have found out, because the reality was worse than they could have ever imagined. Backing up the timeline here, at 6 a.m., Miami-Dade police receive a phone call from a sanitation worker. He was doing his routine rounds in a commercial warehouse lot in northwest Dade County when he saw something odd on the ground of the parking lot between two vehicles. It looked out of place, and as he approached to take a closer look, he realized he was looking at a dead body. In response, the police quickly send out two homicide detectives, Maria Medeiros and Gus Baez. When they got to the scene, police had already taped off the entire area where the vehicles are. As they walked up, they saw the body of a woman wearing a blue party dress. She was lying on her stomach in a pool of blood. And this was a gruesome scene. Upon their initial investigation, they noticed blood spatter on a vehicle, and they took note of that. They thought the crime had been committed right there in the parking lot. They still weren't sure what the cause of death was because no one could move the body until the crime scene technicians arrived with the medical examiner. However, they were taking in everything they could at the scene in order to make a preliminary determination of what could have happened here. Because of how desolate this area was, they wondered if this could be a drug deal gone bad. This area was known to be a meeting place for those type of transactions, or it could be a robbery. With the way the woman was dressed, she could have been a target for thieves, and perhaps it went from bad to worse. They tried to think of where a woman would have been dressed like this. A club, maybe? So they got to thinking about tourists and other people that she could have come in contact with. Could she have been taken by force and forced against her will to have intercourse with someone? These were all working theories. This is not the safest place for a woman to be roaming around by herself. The CSI team arrives, and that is when the detectives get a shock that they were not expecting. As though the scene wasn't shocking enough, when they turn the woman over onto her back, they're staring at a body without a face. And when I first saw this scene and read this, I got choked up. I had to hold back tears. Why? Because how could someone do this? They've got to be less than human. They're an absolute monster. Her face was beaten to the point it was no longer recognizable. She had wounds all over her neck as well. And with the amount of injuries that she sustained, they knew that this was not from someone's fists. She was hit with something heavy, but there was nothing around the scene that looked as though it had been used as a weapon. However, it didn't take long to identify her. Her driver's license and other identification was found next to her body. Of course, they would have to get the autopsy report, but the woman without a face was the once gorgeous, vivacious, compassionate, and kind woman that we know as Wendy Trapaga. How could this happen? How could she have been living the happiest moments of her life and then end up like this? The next step detectives had to take was to notify Wendy's mother. And as I say every time, they reported that this was the worst part of the job. It never gets easier. And when they told her, Miriam was out of her mind with grief, with sadness and shock. She was bawling. She had lost her husband tragically, and now their daughter, just ripped out of her life in the blink of an eye. The detectives spent time with Miriam, consoling her and being there for her, but what they really needed was to gain insight into who her daughter was and what she was doing before she was killed. Miriam said that when Wendy called on Sunday evening, she sounded just fine. She was happy, excited to be on her honeymoon, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. As detectives are talking to Miriam, her phone rings. She answered it, and it's Michel. He's calling again, asking if she had heard from Wendy. And Miriam can't speak. She doesn't know how she's going to break the news to Wendy's new husband of 4 days that his wife is dead. Instead, one of the detectives grabs the phone, and they don't want to tell him over the phone. So they tell him they're about to head over to his apartment. And Michel wants to know what is going on. They aren't too far from his place, so they say, hang tight, we'll be right there. But when they arrive and he lets them in, he just blurts out, is she dead? And I know you might think that's weird, but when you hear that detectives don't want to tell you something over the phone and your wife is missing and they're on the way to your apartment, it's pretty much a given. But they give him the heartbreaking news about his wife, and he just starts to bawl his eyes out. They can tell he is in shock. The first thing they ask him is if he knows anyone who would want to harm Wendy, and he says no. He has no idea. They give him a few minutes so he can calm down, and then they ask him to come to the station so that they can get additional information. When asked what happened leading up to the morning of October 14th, he tells them about their marriage, about the Key West honeymoon, and that Wendy wasn't exactly ready to go home yet. It was still the weekend. She wanted to extend their fun, spice things up by getting a hotel at the Executive to just have a romantic night. He said that after checking out of the other hotel in Key West, they took the long drive to Miami. They had dinner, they went to a movie, they got to the Executive pretty late, like around midnight. They had sex, they took a nap together, and then Wendy went to the jacuzzi and she was kind of relaxing and dozing off here and there. When they checked out of the hotel that morning, that's when they got into the disagreement revolving around Wendy drinking while she was pregnant. While they're going back and forth, Wendy informs him that she's not actually pregnant. What? And this is according to him. They didn't get the autopsy report back, but it's bound to give them concrete information about whether or not this was true. So he says upon hearing Wendy say this, the discussion definitely got more heated. They were close to their apartment, and Michel wanted both of them to cool down, so he left her in the car and went inside to compose himself. He was also trying to keep the noise down because it was really early in the morning. It was like 4 a.m., and he didn't want to disturb the neighbors. About 5 to 10 minutes later, he comes back outside to see why Wendy hadn't come in. That's when he noticed her car was gone and she was nowhere in sight. He figured she went over to her mother's, and that's why he called Miriam to see if she had shown up. They questioned him for 14 hours. And when I hear this, I can imagine being in this like 10 by 10 room just answering questions. And they kept asking him the same one over and over again. Do you know anyone that would want to kill Wendy? After the interview was done, Michel needed someone. He turned to his friend Ramon, who I mentioned earlier. When he arrived at Ramon's, he was disheveled. He looked sad and upset and down and tired. Within the next couple days, the autopsy report comes back. Wendy had 15 to 20 wounds on her face and neck. She was struck with a hard object, completely destroying the structure of her face. It's sad. No one like Wendy deserves something like this. And they have reason to believe that she was killed at the scene where she was found. They revealed that she had also been strangled, and that's usually a personal crime, although it can also be a crime of control and dominance. Plus, they find someone else's DNA on Wendy's dress. Her car is also found nearby. A toxicology report was conducted, and they found alcohol, sleeping pills, painkillers, and anti-anxiety medication in her bloodstream. Her time of death was determined to be between 3 and 5 a.m. on October 14th. She wasn't wearing shoes, but her feet weren't dirty. And that puzzled detectives, and I thought it was kind of interesting as well. Let me know your thoughts on that one. There were no defensive wounds to her arms or her legs, and this indicated that she was most likely either unconscious or restrained in some way when she was attacked by the murderer. But there was something else they confirmed. Remember the claim that Wendy was not pregnant? Well, the coroner determined that was correct. Wendy was not pregnant at the time of her death. So why did she tell her mother that she was? There were a lot of questions left unanswered. Did she leave her apartment and then go somewhere and consume alcohol and drugs and meet up with someone who carried out this heinous crime? That was the newest theory that detectives were working through. The reason? Well, the scene of the crime was only a mile away from, guess where? Miami Velvet Swingers Club. Could she have left Michelle and sought comfort in someone else? Someone that she had met at the club on another occasion, or someone she was talking to? After all, they were technically allowed to hook up with other people, but usually this meant when they were together with other couples, not on their own. But sometimes this lifestyle comes with temptations outside the boundaries that the couple set. So detectives are very interested in this club, as well as everyone who attends the events that could have come in contact with Wendy anytime that she had been there in the past, and who was there on the night she was killed. You have a club where people explore their deepest desires, and many of us know there are sexual deviants that prey on women like Wendy. So they head over to interview the owner of the club, and he agrees to allow them to take DNA tests of all the employees as well as all the people that patronize the establishment. As they wait on those results, they bring Michelle back in, and he confirms that it's true. The couple did live the swingers lifestyle. They were involved sexually with other individuals. They also get a subpoena for both Michelle's and Wendy's phone records. That's a normal part of the procedure. They need to piece together the past few months of Wendy's life. They want to know anyone the couple had contact with. Meanwhile, 5 days following Wendy's death, her family and friends gather at the cemetery to pay their respects and to lay Wendy to rest. It's a very emotional day for them, especially for her mom and her 4 older siblings. As the family is mourning the loss of their beloved Wendy, investigators have a new lead. It comes from Michelle's phone records. He called a number at 3:15 a.m. the morning of the crime. They trace this number back to a pager. Who does it belong to? His ex-girlfriend, Yolanda. Well, they don't know who this is or how they're connected to Michelle. At this point, they notice that there are a number of calls between both of them in the weeks leading up to Wendy's murder. I wasn't surprised. He's a cheater. Nothing has changed. He wants his cake and his ice cream on the side. But detectives want to know more. They call Yolanda in for questioning. What you're about to hear is probably going to blow you away. Or maybe not. But stay tuned, because this case gets more and more convoluted and unbelievable. Like I said in the beginning, because my jaw dropped all the way until the end of this case and the conclusion of who did this and why and how. When they call her, she wants to know why they need to talk to her. They ask her what her connection is to Michelle, and she asks, what is this all about? They tell her the news about Wendy, that she's Michelle's wife and that she was found murdered just a few blocks from Yolanda's home. She tells them that she's Michelle's ex-girlfriend and friend. She willingly comes in for questioning. Her version of events goes like this. She tells detectives, and I'm going to refer to the detectives as them because I realize I repeat detectives a bunch of times. So she tells them she knows of Wendy, but she doesn't know Wendy personally. She explains Michelle left her for Wendy. They want to know details. So she goes back to the beginning of their relationship and tells them everything we already know, but more. The things that we didn't know were going on behind the scenes. Things that poor Wendy was oblivious to. She tells them that she's still madly in love with Michelle. She was heartbroken, destroyed, that he left so abruptly, and she was desperate for answers. That's all she wanted, to know what he was doing and why. So she admits she hacked into his voicemail, and she listened to all Wendy's messages, starting with the one that infuriated her from the beginning, the one where Wendy alluded to the couple living together. She explained she couldn't believe they had been cheating, but that he was already living with someone else. She goes on further to explain that he wouldn't answer her calls, but finally, in the fall of that year, 2002, a few months after Michelle had left, he finally answered his phone when she rang him. And when he picked up, she just blurted out questions that she wanted answers to, and Michelle admitted he was seeing another woman. But he swore, according to Yolanda, that he wasn't in love with Wendy. Now, these are Yolanda's words and her version of how things played out. By all other accounts, Michelle was very much in love with Wendy. So did Yolanda have a reason to lie? Yolanda insists that Michelle told her that he was actually still in love with her and that he was thinking of getting back together. Really? Then why was he carrying on and advancing his relationship with Wendy? Was he that much of a cheater that he would just string all these women along? Well, yeah, he was. And Yolanda said she believed him, and she was so desperate to get him back into her life that she began talking to him every day in hopes that she could rekindle their love. She forgave him. She just wanted him back, no matter what it took. He talked about being able to start his own business soon, and soon enough, Michelle was actually meeting up with Yolanda and carrying on his usual double life. She was also giving him money. He sounds like the Tinder swindler, but worse. They ask Yolanda when she and Michelle hung out last, and she says, oh, it was just a few days ago. So they ask, what was that meetup all about? And she told him that he actually asked her to watch his dogs that weekend. They pressed her, asking if she knew he was married, because it sounded kind of confusing. Yolanda couldn't possibly believe that Michelle was going to get back with her if he was literally married to another woman. They think that she's lying to them. They ask her where she was that weekend with an emphasis on what she was doing the morning the crime occurred. The proximity to the crime scene was very suspicious to investigators. She said she was at home. They ask her, well, can anyone confirm this? And she said, yeah, her family was staying with her. They could vouch for her whereabouts. They ask her if she got a page from Michelle at 3 a.m. on October 14th, the morning Wendy was found dead. And she admits she did, but she never responded because she was taking care of her sick daughter. Michelle knew that her daughter was sick, and the whole weekend he had been checking in on her and Yolanda in case they needed anything. Oh, he's such a nice guy, right? They check out her alibi, and it seems legit. After that, they let Yolanda go. She can't help them with anything else at this point, but they're very interested in digging deeper into who Yolanda was. They're kind of at a dead end because they don't have any concrete evidence. There's no conclusive DNA linking anyone to the crime. No fingerprints, no surveillance footage, no weapon, nothing. The killer could be anyone, and they could be long gone from Miami at this point. So they turn to Ramon, and to sum up his opinion of Yolanda, he says she isn't a good person. She was drama, and he didn't really care for her from the beginning. Another clue is discovered at this point in the investigation. They get word that something's missing from Wendy's trunk. A tire iron. Yes, a tire iron, a heavy object that could certainly cause the injuries that Wendy sustained. And they're pretty sure that that's the murder weapon, but where is it? Now they know someone either brought Wendy to the warehouse parking lot unconscious or by force, or she willingly drove there but was forced out of her car and killed with an item that was readily available in the moment. So was this planned, or was this a crime of passion that happened out of nowhere, with the killer grabbing anything they could to harm Wendy? Not only that, as the investigation went deeper into Yolanda and Michelle's affair, they found out Michelle made a number of calls to Yolanda in the hours leading up to the murder. And get this, one of these calls was a block away from the crime scene. They begin to piece together a theory. Maybe Michelle's story checks out, but there's something missing. Maybe he did get into a heated argument when he found out that Wendy was lying about being pregnant. Why would she do this? Well, maybe to get Michel to agree to a quick wedding, to get him to commit. And then when Michel learned of this fact, he got enraged, he drove her to that parking lot, and he beat her to death. But they don't have any evidence to link him to the crime. They'd have to find out a way to prove that this was true. About 2 months following Wendy's murder, something Michel does piques investigators' interest enough to make him their prime suspect. He tried to collect a life insurance policy that was taken out on Wendy's life. However, the insurance company refuses to grant him the funds. Is this suspicious? Yes, but it doesn't mean he murdered Wendy. Many couples take out life insurance policies, but they need to know more. They turn back to Wendy's family and they ask, "Did you know about the life insurance?" And it turns out Miriam was aware of it. She told them that she thought it was weird. They had no children and they rushed into marriage and now they've got life insurance. But what was really mind-blowing was the amount. $1 million. Now investigators realized Michel had 1 million reasons to want his new bride dead. Miriam also explains that she never had a good feeling about Michel. He had a temper. He was arrogant, and she had actually seen him get angry and throw his motorcycle helmet to the ground. This wasn't even over anything extreme. It was a normal, everyday inconvenience, and he made it into something more. She witnessed her sweet, innocent daughter just standing there stunned because Wendy didn't witness that type of anger and she didn't know how to respond. She loved Michel, so she let it go. Investigators go back and they dig even deeper. They find out Michel had more secrets and they weren't just about other affairs. He had a criminal record. Several years before, he was arrested and charged for armed robbery. He went into a pharmacy and he tried to get the employees to hand over whatever was in the register, as well as prescription medications and anything else he could get his hands on. In addition to those charges, he had a concealed weapons charge and another one for fleeing from officers. This guy is not good. No way. He's got way too many secrets. But was he hiding something else? Something even more sinister? The murder of his own wife? That's what investigators are getting closer and closer to finding out. Before they can bring the law down on Mr. Michel Escoto, he brings the law down upon the insurance company. He sues them. That's right. He's used to getting his way, and when this company wouldn't comply, well, he took matters into his own hands. But when Wendy's family found out, they joined with the insurance company in a civil suit to block Michel from receiving a dime. They believed he killed Wendy, and they're going to do anything that they could to stop this man from thriving. I would do the same thing. Money can make people do crazy things, like bring a lawsuit against an insurance company, but doesn't mean that he did away with the supposed love of his life for money. Not necessarily. There wasn't proof. Besides, they both took out $1 million life insurance policies on one another. If he was truly grieving her loss, couldn't he believe it would be unfair to lose what he believed he bargained for before her death with her consent, as though it was a wish that she had for him in case anything happened to her, for better or worse? But why Wendy and not Yolanda or any of the other women that he was seeing? They were all alive and well. And to top it off, if he was guilty, would he really be so overtly bold to implicate himself by bringing such a public lawsuit? Wendy's family said yeah, because he's that narcissistic. As the lawsuit is pending, time is going by. There still was no justice done for Wendy. A year after her death, a tribute to Wendy appeared in the Miami Herald newspaper, written on behalf of her family, and I want to read it to you. Wendy, you were such a beautiful gift to this world, and now 1 year after your senseless death, we realize how the memory of you is so deeply etched into our hearts. Your name is synonymous with love, compassion, altruism, and hope. You were known as a daughter, sister, aunt, niece, granddaughter, and true friend. In your wake, you leave a huge void that can only be partially filled with warm remembrance from the many lives you have touched. Your existence will never be forgotten. We are consoled only in knowing that you are now with God and with your beloved Poppy. whom you missed so greatly. May you rest peacefully, sweet Wendy. And that really touched my heart. It was so beautifully written, yet so devastating. It's bittersweet. Now I need to take you back to the civil suit, with MetLife Insurance being sued by Michelle. Now you see, in order to collect the money, he has to tell his version of what happened to his wife under oath in a deposition, and I happen to have part of that deposition video. I want to play it for you because it's the first time you're ever going to hear from Michelle himself. You can tell me what you think about his demeanor, his answers, and his version of the events as they were unfolding, according to him.
As you sit here today, sir, do you know anybody that wanted to kill Wendy?
No, I did not.
You know anybody that had any reason to kill Wendy?
I did not know anyone that had any reason to kill Wendy, no.
Now, when you left the Miami Executive Hotel, was that sometime around 3 in the morning?
I do not remember it was the wee hours of the morning.
And then you left here and you went, your intention was to drive to your Miami Beach apartment, correct?
Correct.
And on the way there, you called Yolanda.
Correct.
And you called her on her beeper, correct?
Negative. I do not believe I called her on a beeper. No, I believe I called her on her cell phone.
On her cell phone?
I do believe. I could be mistaken, but that's the best that I can remember.
Okay. And you weren't able to speak with Yolanda, correct?
That is correct.
Now, investigators are listening to what he's saying under oath in the deposition, and they're comparing it to what he said during the investigation. And they're finding inconsistencies all over the place. Was she drinking? Was she not drinking? Whether she was driving or not driving. It just started to unravel and make him look very guilty. And now they're 100% convinced that they have their killer.
When you arrived in your apartment in Miami Beach, you walked out of the car, correct? When you
Correct.
stayed in the car.
Correct.
Did you stay at any time in the car arguing with Wendy?
We were talking in the car, yes, for a little bit.
You were talking or arguing?
Very light argument, I would say, due to the time of the day, the time of the night. Had it been earlier in the day, it would have probably been more of a heated argument. But we were trying, I was trying to keep it low key for the neighbors.
And on the way to the apartment in Miami Beach, you two argued on the way there, correct?
I think it got a little more heated once we're like on the beach and like getting to the house. It was less of an argument on the way over. I would definitely characterize it as much less.
And when you left the car that morning, Wendy was sitting in the passenger seat, correct?
Correct.
So you took the keys and you went directly into the apartment.
Correct.
Why did you come out after 5 minutes?
I wanted to talk, I go to the car, go to my Wi-Fi's.
Okay. Was Wendy gone at that time?
Yes.
Do you recall calling Yolanda that morning before you were interrogated by the police?
I don't have a recollection of speaking with her, but I most likely did.
Why would you have called?
Most likely to complain, to bitch.
About Wendy?
Most likely not about her, about what had happened, about her taking off.
Because of this, prosecutors actually decide that they have enough evidence to arrest Michelle and charge him for the murder of his wife, Wendy. Yes, of course, it's all circumstantial, but they have an inkling that Yolanda knows more than what she's told them. They think she's covering for Michelle because, like she said, she's in love with him, almost obsessed with getting him back, and she was a scorned lover. Seems like she would have something against Wendy. So wouldn't that mean she would hide the secrets of her lover? At this point, 3 years after Wendy's murder, and the lawsuit was still ongoing. And Michelle decides he's going to drop this case against MetLife Insurance. But because Wendy's family went and filed against Michelle, that money was in escrow until everything was said and done. If Michelle was found guilty during the murder trial, the money would go to Wendy's family. And you're probably not going to believe this, but the case gets even more twisted. As time goes on, Michelle and Yolanda start dating again. They had gotten back together after Wendy's murder, but now with everything going on with Michelle being charged with murder and everything, their relationship was kind of on the rocks. So this was an opportunity for the investigators to jump in and try to get Yolanda to talk. It's 2005. Yolanda was brought in again. Now here's the thing. They have more evidence at this point, something to make her crack. They present her with documents that prove that it was her that paid for the executive Miami hotel stay, not Michelle. This means that little rendezvous, the little sexcapade, whatever you want to call it, before the end of their honeymoon, wasn't his idea, and it wasn't Wendy's idea. Now what are you going to say, Yolanda? Why are you paying for your ex-boyfriend's hotel room for him and his new wife to have a sexual encounter? Something doesn't add up. And investigators tell her no matter what she wants to do, they're going to subpoena her and make her testify in court. So she better fess up to what's going on, because if she knows more than what she's telling them, there's going to be trouble for Yolanda. At this point, she implicates Michelle in Wendy's murder. She said it all started the day in fall when she confronted him about hearing the voice message. This is when she says that he tells her he's not in love with Wendy, he's in love with her, and that he wants to be back with Yolanda. It gets even more wicked. She says that he tells her he has a plan for them to get back together. Now, as time went on, Yolanda finds out that Wendy's pregnant. This causes a complete shitstorm. She's sitting there thinking, this man's going to come back to me, we're going to be together again, but now his girlfriend's pregnant? What does that mean for Yolanda and Michelle? Well, he tries to convince her, I can't leave now. That's just not a possibility. I've got to marry her. But I have a reason. 1 million reasons to be exact. She tells investigators that he insists he's only marrying Wendy because he has a $1 million life insurance policy on her. He says he doesn't even care about Wendy, that he's going to get rid of her. And as soon as he does, he's going to come back and they're going to live the life they've always dreamed about. I know that most of us are not going to understand this because we're not crazy, but Yolanda is sick. And when I mean sick, she's lovesick, she's love-struck. She's all the things that women are who are manipulated by these type of narcissistic abusers. There's no excuse for what happens next. But in her twisted, convoluted, manipulative situation that she's in with this man, that she thinks loves her, she basically says, I support you with whatever it takes. Now, prosecutors know that this woman knew. She knew. And she did not go to authorities. Could she know more? Could she be involved? So they're sort of threatening her with this information. She insists she has nothing to do with what actually unfolded. Yes, she knew what he was going to do. Essentially, he did drop his dogs off at the apartment. She watched him on the honeymoon, which is when Michelle said he was going to carry out this murder. But Yolanda said it didn't go exactly as planned, because the plan that he initially told her about had a different timeline and a different location, but it didn't work. That's when he decided to put this other plan in motion, because originally, when they had their first little talk about getting rid of Wendy, he said that he was going to take her on a vacation in New Orleans. I don't know why there, but he was somehow going to make it look like an accident. They were going to go to Mardi Gras, and she was going to die. Then all they had to do was wait and collect the insurance and then ride off into the sunset together. Even though Yolanda, in the state of mind that she's in, believing that Michelle is going to do this and then come back to her, she still couldn't stand the thought of the man that she's obsessed with sleeping with another woman, being with another woman, marrying another woman, and potentially having a baby with another woman. I can't believe that she would even stand for that, but I guess if you stand to gain $1 million with the man you think loves you, you'll do anything. Then things take a little bit of a turn. Yolanda decides to get a lawyer, and she stops talking to investigators. Since they really don't have any concrete evidence against Yolanda at this point, they're still building their case against Michelle. They let her go. It's not until a year later, in 2006, when Yolanda's attorneys decide to talk to prosecutors, and they say, here's the deal. Yolanda knows way more than she's telling you, but she's not willing to tell you anything else unless she's granted full immunity. Prosecutors need that information. They need it. They want to put this man behind bars. So they agree to this deal to give Yolanda immunity. And I have to say, This bothers me in so many ways, and you'll find out more about that later, but I understand the concept. However, this has definitely been questioned many times in this case. But what made it so compelling is that she marched right into the state attorney's office with her lawyers, and she told them that she took Michelle away from the scene of the crime that night. This is a nail in the coffin. The jury would be very compelled to find him guilty if someone actually witnessed him coming from the scene. Obviously, there had to be an exchange or a conversation or something must have happened between Michelle and Yolanda. So she knows a lot about that night. And they need her. They don't have a weapon. They don't have anything but Yolanda. But they have this witness that they grant immunity to. But as you probably know in life, we always say, there are two sides to every story, and maybe there's three sides or more or four. We'll never know 100% what happened. But wait until you hear Yolanda's version of events. But none of these stories are going to come out anytime soon. 12 years go by. 12 years after Wendy's murder, Michelle is finally going to trial. And of course he pleads not guilty. Wait until you hear the prosecutor's argument. I have some of these court clips, and I have to tell you right now, this is probably one of the most twisted, heartbreaking, and evil cases that I've ever researched. Especially because we hear from Michelle himself. Not because he decides to take the stand and testify in his own defense. No, even worse, he decides to represent himself. I guess being in prison or wherever he was the last 12 years, he learned a little about the law. And maybe in his perspective, he learned enough to be a better attorney and defend himself better than a real criminal defense lawyer. It's really laughable. And it says so much about a guy like him. It's like Ted Bundy all over again, but worse. So in April of 2014, 42-year-old Michelle Escato represents himself. And his first witness, Miriam Benitez, Wendy's own mother. And she had to look this man in the eye and answer questions from him. It's absolutely unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this before, and you're going to see it too. This is him in the courtroom. And here you hear the prosecutor talking about the reasons he would do this.
Money is the root of this defendant's evil. He would prey on an unsuspecting 21-year-old girl and marry her. 4 days after that marriage, this defendant bludgeoned and strangled Wendy Trapaga to death.
Along with the argument and the theory and the alleged reason, the theory about why and how he targeted a gullible and naive Wendy from the beginning, knowing all along he was going to kill her. That was his plan from day one. And now we have poor Miriam. She had to take the stand and use an interpreter. She explained what I told you before, how shocked she was that Wendy and Michelle were taking out life insurance policies on one another.
No me sentí bien.
I did not feel good. I expressed to her, why insurance? They're not even married.
No tenían hijos.
They didn't have children.
¿Por qué un seguro?
Why insurance?
She just didn't understand the need for it. Now, one of the detectives I talked about before, Maria, she gets on the stand and she talks about why she believed that Michelle was guilty from the beginning.
I told him if he couldn't muster up a tear for his wife for 4 days, to muster up a tear for the $1 million he's never going to see.
What was his reaction?
And in case you're not watching the screen, at the very end, when she's asked that last question, she puts her arms across her chest. She's crossing them and giving a smug look on her face, the way that she said she saw Michelle do that day. She wasn't sure if the way he reacted was the callous indifference he had towards Wendy herself, that she just wasn't worth anything, or whether he just thought women were worthless, because it seemed like all he used them for was his own benefit. And you'll hear more about this from the women that he used, who are luckily still alive to tell their stories. Here is one of his former girlfriends who gets on the stand and talks about how she was giving him money every month. This is what she did.
How much money did you give him a month?
Approximately maybe 1,500.
This is what he did. He manipulated these women. He charmed them and made them believe he was in love with them, just like he did with Yolanda. All of these women were willing to do something for him. Was Yolanda willing to kill for him? That was one of the questions I had. $1,500 a month this woman was giving him. That's unbelievable. I just don't know how he does it. And of course, we know that there's yet another woman supporting him for years, Yolanda. And she's the prosecution's star witness. She gets on that stand and she has to answer questions from her former lover, the man that she's testifying against. And it gets emotional. I want you to take a good, hard look at Yolanda, and I want to hear from you. Because when I look at her, to me, there's something missing. There's something that doesn't add up to me. And I want your thoughts on what you're about to hear.
Yolanda Cerrillo. Have you ever had a man that you could share your life with? I thought it was Michelle.
She thought that she was going to spend the rest of her life with Michelle until she found out that he pretty much exchanged her for a younger version when he met Wendy. Tell me you don't think that this woman was enraged. Tell me you don't think this woman would take it upon herself to do something about it. Here's the important part that I told you about before. The story Michelle gave her allegedly about how he didn't even love Wendy, and it was all about Yolanda and the plan for them to be together.
He said to calm down, that it was all a plan, that he didn't love her, he loved me. He was gonna marry her, they were gonna have an insurance policy, and she was gonna die.
All right, so he told you he had a plan.
Yes.
Now wait, because it gets worse. Yes, of course. She's admitting to the whole courtroom, like she did to investigators, that she knew about this plan. And she was okay with it. She was okay with the love of her life taking another woman's life. It could have been her, but no, she felt like she was winning. But there's more. She admits that not only did she know, she actually helped formulate this plan. Yeah, it wasn't a surprise to me when I was watching these clips of the trial. She actually went through the motions as though she was Wendy, and they tried out these various ways they could possibly get Wendy to die. That is completely sick. She let this man try out versions of how he was ultimately going to carry out his new wife's murder. Why do I get the impression that this woman was the one that came up with the plan? Why do I get the feeling that there's more to this plan of Michelle's? That she's guiding him. In her own words, she was giving him better suggestions and they're practicing it to try to figure out how they can get it just right. Can you imagine? And I guess another question I had was, did Michelle do this? Was he really there at her apartment practicing these things? Or was this just a lie? Was it her imagination? Her obsessive thoughts? That she actually thought she was planning this with Michelle, but in reality, she was just planning it by herself. It definitely crossed my mind because she's not in her right mind. Would Michelle really do this? I think it's more plausible that they figured this out together because he was the one that had access to Wendy. Yolanda didn't. But doesn't it seem more realistic that Yolanda would be angry at Michelle and angry at Wendy and try to concoct a plan? But now you're about to hear her talk about all of this and how it comes together, how they plan to use Percocet to drug Wendy because it would be easier to drown her. And apparently there was that other plan they concocted about New Orleans, but it was taking too long, and therefore he had to rush the marriage. I'm going to come back to that because there's this little caveat that I want to bring up that I think is really sickening, if obviously this isn't sickening enough. There's a caveat having to do with the pregnancy, but I want to focus your attention on another snag in their plans that she's about to talk about right now. It was the fact that they were in Key West having fun together, and he puts these Percocet allegedly in her drink, but she doesn't drink it because it doesn't taste good. So he ends up waiting, holding on to the rest of this concoction, and then putting it into one of her drinks that she was having at the executive hotel. When they're having this romantic time and she's in the heart-shaped jacuzzi that night, he actually gets her to take the drugs, according to Yolanda. Now, the problem was even though Wendy's in this haze, apparently, and I don't know why. I don't know how this wasn't possible because this is a big man. You see him, you see his stature. He was way bigger than Wendy, but he's somehow unable to drown her. He got her to take the drugs, but drowning her didn't work out, right? So Yolanda says he shows up at her apartment in the middle of the night. Now, was this in regard to that 3 o'clock in the morning page that she got that she allegedly didn't respond to? And he just drove over because she wasn't answering? Well, apparently, according to her, he shows up. When he comes to the door, this is what she said she saw outside in the vehicle.
Did you see anything in the passenger seat?
I saw a movement of somebody inside the car.
Imagine knowing that this young girl, as a mother, knowing that someone's daughter, someone's precious love of their life, that they gave birth to, that they raised until they were 21 years old. Can you imagine knowing that they're still alive, but that they're about to die? I cannot imagine someone being so heartless that they can't even step into someone else's shoes, another mother's shoes, another human being's shoes, and realize that this is wrong. She could have stopped this at any moment, but she chose not to. Instead, according to her, he said, "Follow me." And they drove to the warehouse. And when they got there, this is what she said happened.
And then what happened?
He got out of the car, he walked over to my car, and he told me, drive around, give me 20 to 25 minutes.
That's disgusting. Disgusting. 21 years of life taken in 20 minutes. Give me 20 minutes. Imagine waiting around those 20 minutes knowing that someone's life is being extinguished, that she's being bludgeoned and strangled just feet away from you, and you do nothing. Finally, she says that she sees the love of her life covered in blood with a tire iron in his hand, just walking down the street. He gets in her car, they drive to Biscayne Bay, and he throws the tire iron into the water, and she watches this happen.
And as he's walking, I saw him when he threw the thing in the water.
What I think is really interesting here, because I pay attention to semantics, she acts like she doesn't know what the weapon is. She doesn't know what a tire iron is. And okay, maybe some of us don't. But here's the thing. She's known about this case for 12 years. You're bound to know what kind of weapon he used. In my mind, I'm thinking, wouldn't it benefit her if she acted as though, oh, she didn't even realize what it was that he threw into the water? I feel she had way more to do with this plan. Perhaps she was the mastermind or even the perpetrator herself. So wouldn't it make sense for her to distance herself from the weapon? Oh, he just threw something in the water. I found that to be so interesting, that choice of words that she used. Then, according to her, she drives him home to the apartment that he shared with the woman that he just killed. And she takes his bloody clothing and she throws it away in a dumpster. I'm sitting here thinking, if this really happened, why didn't the forensic team go to her car and find blood? That was a fact I never heard about in this case. And I'm thinking, okay, I know so many years have gone by. I don't know when they found that out. But even if they knew she was a witness, a potential witness, like a year later or not even, wouldn't they go and do that anyway? Isn't that something that they would search? Because it would solidify this whole story. Then the prosecutor asked if she feels good about what she did. This is her response.
Happy with yourself?
No. I'm worthless. That's how I feel right now.
Is this about you?
No, it's not. It's about a mother who lost her daughter, and I had something to do with it.
Unbelievably, like I said before, something I've never seen before is that she's about to be confronted by Michel himself. Even though Michel represented himself, he had a standby lawyer, a real criminal defense lawyer, helping him. And that attorney, he wasn't just saying this, he truly believed that Michel wasn't the killer. There might have been bad qualities about Michel, but he believed it was 100% Yolanda that was responsible for this crime. This defense lawyer also had a lot of issues with the circumstantial evidence that the state had, and that their star witness was a woman who was a lover scorned. And in a lot of people's minds, If they were being charged with a crime like this, they wouldn't represent themselves that they were guilty. Some people are calling him a narcissist, but let's say he really was innocent. Maybe he wouldn't think twice about defending himself because he believed he had the right to. And it was important for him to, in his own words, because these things were a lie and he wanted to prove that. And it was Yolanda that was responsible. Okay, what you're about to see is really cringy, especially for me. You know, I'm not a lawyer, but I did graduate from law school. I have never been in a courtroom like this. I don't even know if I would do a better job, but it's just cringy for me to see him represent himself like this. But in his opening argument, this is what he says.
I believe the evidence will show that only an imbecile and an imbecile who's in love with money would kill somebody 4 days after they were married to that person.
It would only be an imbecile, and he's not an imbecile, right? Really? And you're not obsessed with money because you've had every woman in your life give you money. It's always been about money. It just makes him look more and more guilty, in my opinion. I was watching one of these shows, it might have been Dateline, and I heard a quote from Abraham Lincoln that I had never heard before. It goes like this: "A man who is his own lawyer has a fool for a client." Think about that for a minute. They're emotional, and your emotions can get the best of you. That's why it's better to have someone else speak for you in this kind of circumstance, because you don't want to put your foot in your mouth, and you're going to see what happens when the emotions get the best of Michel. He definitely tried to do his best to look like a professional, an innocent professional guy with the glasses on, little preppy outfit, talking sweet and soft and kind and being patient and humanizing himself to the jury, because that's important. I don't know. There's just something about his eyes, something about the way he speaks. It's kind of condescending. I'm not buying it. Example right here of how he gets emotional. And the judge has to stop him because one of the other attorneys is objecting.
Judge, and telling them that he was being sandbagged because he has...
He also breaks down in tears. They could have been faked, but there he is. Oh, and he makes this statement. Wow, this is harder than I thought it would be. Is that a true statement because he's really overwhelmed? Or was he trying to appeal to the heart of the jury?
Wow, this is harder than I thought it would be.
And what's this about? He seemingly trips and falls over the podium. Oh, Judge, I twisted my ankle.
Sorry. Twisted my ankle, Judge.
What was that? Was it theatrics? Was he trying to pull on the heartstrings of the jury? Because poor Michel, he's up against these big-time lawyers. I think he's used to being conniving. I think he's used to being manipulative. And I think he's trying to do the same thing in the courtroom. Oh, but the best part and the most emotional aspect of Michel defending himself was when he had to come face to face with the man from MetLife Insurance, the one that stopped him from being able to collect that $1 million. Here's what happened.
You have been married to her for 3 days before you killed her to get the life insurance. So to me, that was very clear.
Judge, give me a second because I'm going to say something that I shouldn't. If you say that again,
Objection,
it's going to take all of those guys wearing white. It's going to take all of them and some more.
Michel goes off. That's the only way I can describe it. He can't hold back because this man's unstable. He says, "Excuse me, Judge, I'm about to say something I shouldn't." Why are you even saying that to the judge? And if you're not following what he's saying here, he's basically threatening this witness, saying, if you say that again, I'm going to attack you. And it's going to take more than all the officers in this room to protect you. I don't know how he thought that that was going to make him look as though he was innocent. Was it like, how dare you say I killed my wife? Well, it backfired. You're trying to get the jury to like you. You're not supposed to be showing them that you're capable of getting angry and threatening to hurt someone. But he's in contempt of court at this point, and the judge sanctioned him for this outburst in court and is not looking good for him in order to prove that he's not this monster, that he doesn't hurt women. He decides to go ahead and bring in one of his ex-girlfriends. And this is what he asks her.
Did I ever throw anything at you?
No.
Did I ever punch you?
No.
Did I ever slap you?
No.
Did I ever throw you on the ground?
No.
No, he never did anything physical. Not only that, He brings Miriam onto the stand and questions her about what Wendy says there had to be more than one person responsible for this, 2 or maybe more, and that they were both right-handed. I can follow this. I can understand where he's coming from. So I see the argument. I do. Think about it and I think you'll understand. I personally think it does bring a little bit of reasonable doubt, and Michelle's DNA wasn't present on Wendy's clothing or at the scene. However, listen to what was present.
There were several of the markers where his DNA is not represented.
They actually found 2 DNA samples from 2 different men, as well as a woman's DNA. That's pretty interesting. Could it point to Yolanda? Could she have conspired with someone else besides Michelle? Not only that, the defense also brings up the fact that Yolanda's not a credible witness. She's lied from the beginning. First she said she didn't know anything. Then she says, okay, I knew of the plan, but nothing else. And now she knows all of this. She's changed her story again and again. And in the last case I did, I talked about how there's a race sometimes to be first to get the better deal. If Michelle was innocent, I'm just saying, if he was, wouldn't it be convenient for Yolanda to rush in and make a confession that would give her immunity so that now she can pin it on someone else? And here's something that I guess piqued my interest in a way where I thought, oh, that makes more sense to me. Not saying I believe this is true. It just kind of clicked. Would there be a reason why Michelle would do that type of damage to Wendy? Think about it for a second. He could have easily just strangled her. She was strangled and also bludgeoned. If you're trying to get away with a murder and you're someone like Michelle who just wants to take the money and run, would you really risk blood getting everywhere and making noise? And okay, it's a desolate warehouse area, I get it. But wouldn't it make more sense to just strangle her? Wouldn't it make more sense for someone that hated Wendy to do this? Do you think Michelle really hated Wendy? Because by all accounts, he loved Wendy. Maybe he didn't ever love Wendy. Maybe Yolanda's telling the truth. That he just targeted her. That it was all a facade. And he married her just to kill her. But doesn't it make more sense that someone with extreme hatred, someone like a scorned lover, would beat Wendy the way that she did? To take away her beauty? To literally erase her face. Well, that's what the defense was. She hated what Wendy stood for. What did she stand for? Yolanda didn't even know her. What was it? That she resembled a younger version of Yolanda? She was the woman that your lover left you for? Wendy represented the betrayal. She wished she would just go away. To me, that is very powerful. This woman has immunity, but she hated Wendy, and she wished that she would go away. And she did. We're almost to the end, and I want to tell you something about the pregnancy. A vital fact that I thought was interesting reading through all the research of this case. There were some interesting claims and theories made about the pregnancy. You know that Wendy supposedly told her mother that she was pregnant. However, she wasn't pregnant, so why would she lie to her own mother? It doesn't seem like Wendy's that type of girl. She loved her family, and her mom and her were very close. So one of the theories is that Michelle, in order to get her to marry him as quick as he wanted, because he was running out of money, he faked the pregnancy test. So you're going to say, wait, what? But it really wouldn't be that hard, would it? Just take a marker, put a little extra line. It's plausible. I don't know. I mean, as a woman who has taken pregnancy tests myself, I'm not really sure I believe it, but it was a theory. And then she believed it was the right thing to do to get married because that's what she believed in. But on the other hand, there's another theory that Wendy was the one that wanted to get married. And so she faked the pregnancy. She told Michelle that she was pregnant in order to get him to commit. Which one do you think is more realistic? If you go with the theory that Michelle really thought she was pregnant and that argument really did happen about her not drinking, and that argument caused all of these events to be set in place, but that instead of him carrying out this crime, there's an argument that when he went inside, she left, and what happened was out of his control. Why was she wearing a party dress? If they had just come from the hotel back home, would she be driving in a party dress? Or did she leave, put a party dress on to go somewhere with someone, and this ended up happening to her? I want to know what you really think. But what would she have done when there was no baby that actually arrived? So part of me really thinks that theory about Michelle being the one who faked it is more realistic to me. And then it was all part of the plan. Now he knew what he was going to say that they got in a fight about. It was the drinking. And it would also destroy her character in some ways, making it look like this is a woman who disregarded her unborn child just to take one last dig at her. Because after all, she was just a meal ticket in his eyes. The prosecution goes first. And this was very interesting. Listen to what the prosecutor says.
I can't charge her. I'd love to. But I can't. And she came in here and she filled in the details. She gave you the answers to questions that you had.
You heard that, right? She said she wished she could charge Yolanda, but she can't. So what's the next best thing? The same thing I said earlier. The reason they're giving her immunity, because they wanted someone to go down for this crime. And she was the first one to come forward and admit that she had something to do with it. They wish they could charge her, but they can't. So when it came to closing arguments, Michelle, whether he was just nervous or thought that his standby attorney could maybe do a better job because he's the real professional defense attorney, he turned over the reins to his attorney. This was a 7-week trial, and the criminal defense attorney is about to wrap up this case. He's attempting to give a compelling argument that puts reasonable doubt into the mind of the jurors. Because if one juror isn't convinced, then you've got to start over.
Mr. London to take over as your counsel at this time.
I would like Mr. London to take over, Judge. Thank you, Mr. London. I'm ready to proceed, Judge.
The defense's argument was mostly around not making an emotionally driven decision, that this was a court of law. They're waiting for the jury to deliberate. And the family gets together, they're hugging each other. They're praying, they're hugging the prosecutor, and they're waiting. It only took 2.5 hours for the jury to come back with their verdict. But Wendy's family has been waiting years for justice, and now they're sitting in the courtroom waiting again. You're going to watch and listen to the clerk reading the verdict.
We, the jury in Miami-Dade County, Florida, this 22nd day of April 2014, find the defendant, Michelle Escoto, guilty of first-degree premeditated murder.
Just look at his face. Guilty. Guilty. Do you think his face reflects that? His mouth in a frown shape? What do you think it looks like to you? Well, to Wendy's family, it looks like justice. They're overwhelmed with emotion. They're crying. They're praying. They're feeling as though they finally had closure. But this was the sentencing hearing, and the judge was about to announce Michelle's sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. After that, Michelle has the audacity to proclaim his innocence to Wendy's family. Here's that clip.
No matter how much satisfaction this verdict has given any of you, an innocent person was convicted in this case.
Do you think that justice was served? Wendy's family doesn't think so. They think someone got away with murder, and that was Yolanda. One of her sisters said what I echo. Do you think complete justice was served? Because Wendy's family doesn't. They think someone got away with murder. Yolanda. One of Wendy's sisters said what I echoed, that how can a mother take another mother's child away from them? They're both monsters. And the day of the sentencing, her family went to her gravesite and they prayed and they held hands and they talked to her. There was finally closure for this family, as much as there could be. This was a tough one for me. And I thank all of you for staying till the end if you did and you're here right now. And I thank all of you for being here every week and taking an interest and investing your time in each one of these stories. It breaks my heart that these things happen to these people, and it breaks my heart to have to tell you the stories, but at the same time, it really helps each and every one of these victims' memories live on. And I hope I can continue doing this. So thank you so very much for being here. I will see you in my next video. Bye.